Monday, March 18th, 2024, and this is episode 7 of my 2024 Grime Time Garage Vlog, where I do dumb things in my garage so you don't. So over the past week, solely focused on Project Risky Business, my $4,000 1985 Porsche 928 barn find that I'm currently driving. In this week's episode, I'm going to take you through what I did to realign the steering wheel, or what people call reclocking it, sorting the electric hatch release on both the passenger and driver's side, what it took to get not only the switches working, but the rear hatch adjusted so it opens properly, adding aftermarket insulation underneath the seat carpets, front and rear, reinstalling the back seat and the rear console, and what I learned taking the car on Saturday on a 120-mile round trip to Allentown, Pennsylvania and back. What I have to do next to get this car fully sorted. Stay tuned. Let's address the 400-pound gorilla in the room. As you can see, I've got the steering wheel aligned. I couldn't believe the comments coming back last week about how it being out of line. I was leaving it until I was going to take the dash pod off in the future, but since it was bothering everybody's OCD, I just went ahead. It's a pretty straightforward thing to do. You basically unclip the horn. This pops off. There's a 27 millimeter bolt that I use a deep well socket on. Typically, I make it tight for obvious reasons as I can. I don't torque it. Just get it as tight as I can. There's a spring washer that sits behind the nut. And it's about a 15-minute job from start to finish once you know what you're doing. So I managed to do that. As you can see, the car is tracking. So with the steering wheel taken care of, one of the things I had forgotten is when I bought a new set of carpets from Classic 9 Leather, I did not buy insulation, and it was clear that heat and cold come through the carpets. So I purchased some insulation from Thermo via Amazon, and I cut that to fit underneath all 4 sections of carpet. If you're not familiar with it, most Porsches of this vintage, they rely on it's not a one-piece molded thing like they do in modern cars. They use I don't know, it's at least a dozen individual pieces. The 4 main pieces I ordered, because the other ones were just too mouse infested and beyond repair. Their backing was gone, so it just made sense to get new carpet. And I did that about 2 years ago, but I never ordered the insulation. Now that I'm getting down to a path here, I want to drive the car, that needed to be done. So the Thermo seems to be working well. It's a matter of just cutting. I didn't attach it at all. The carpet is holding it in place, the way the carpet goes in. And it's just a good time to clean everything up. Some other work I had done over the past months. So the insulation really seems to work. Just quiet it down a little bit in here, but I do have a noise that's nagging me, and I will get to that in a minute. So the next thing I wanted to tackle was a small but one of those projects on a car restoration that it's a major win if you get it right. And on this car, it's the electric hatch release. There's a button on both sides of this car, on the bucket seats. There is a small button that shows the hatch, and you pull up on that, and doing that cycles the rear hatch release once. Now, that one was working, but ever since I installed the stereo, this one was not. And even though the electrical connection was working, I was not getting it was not working on the back. I watched another video on somebody who adjusted theirs, and I saw that you have to play with the up and down. I had already purchased a plastic insert for the existing lock from 928s or us, I don't know, maybe a year ago. Put that in, didn't seem to help, but I didn't understand you had to adjust things. When I came over to the driver's side, there's a plate in front of the front seat here that houses the speaker wires, because the other thing on this side is a balance control. That's no longer needed with this modern Blaupunk radio I put in. And I thought maybe the wiring was there. Well, lo and behold, I take out all the trim, and the wiring for the thing I didn't realize was stuck under the seat track, the driver's side seat track. So I had to unbolt the seat slightly, get enough clearance to loosen that, and pull the wiring. Unfortunately, because of me moving this seat back, unknowingly having that wiring underneath it, that caused some fraying. So I had to resplice the wires, tape them all up well, get them all connected. And sure enough, once I put that all back together, I went back and I played with the adjustment, and it's counterintuitive, at least to me. But what I did was I actually moved the unit up closer to the lock. I thought moving it down would make the arm tighter and cycle, but actually moving it up forces the clip's hand a little bit with the articulating arm on the electric motor. And sure enough, the hatch doesn't pop up. It doesn't push it enough that the hatch pops up like I see in some other videos, but I think that's creative editing. All I know is when the hatch is locked and I pull one of these buttons now, they only work when you're not driving. Works like a charm. Don't need the key, and I can open up the hatch like in a modern car. So it's a really huge win for me, and I did that. Once I had the hatch release button sorted, I moved my attention to the long overdue process of reinstalling the back seat and the console. If you recall, it's been probably over a year that I took the seats out and the console out, so as well as the rear quarter trim, so that I could re-dye everything. It had faded from sun bleaching, and I wanted to get it looking as close to factory fresh as I could. So I've been putting off working on that. Seats are a little hard to... The cushions themselves are not hard to put in, but the seat backs, getting those back in are a bit of a bear, and the alignment issue. I probably spent close to an hour on each side trying to get the stupid bolts to get aligned, and eventually I got them in, but it was a long process. But as you can tell, the seats look pretty good. The only downside right now is I'm missing the trim pieces where the seatbelt rollers come out and into the car. So a minor thing. Eventually I'll find them and I'll put them in. They snap right in. From an interior standpoint, everything's back together. One thing I didn't mention during the drive is that the battery was not holding a charge anymore. So I went to my local auto parts store, bought a new H8. The one I put in was already 3.5 years old, so I was on borrowed time with it. And the car's been running fine since with the new battery. All right, so with the insulation in place, the car seeming to run right around town, and those fixed, I wanted to go see my grandson on Saturday the 16th, my brand new 1-month-old grandson. I convinced Nurse Nancy, let's take it for a drive, a shakedown cruise, if you will. And we took it to Allentown, just north of the airport where my son lives. So on Saturday morning, we proceeded to take this car to Allentown. It's a 120-mile round trip, and I learned a bunch of things on it. The first is that the car runs like shit. And when I say that, it starts fine. It has a slight lope on the idle, a slight rough idle, but it just doesn't have any power. No. let me put it to you this way. The 928S US edition with 288 horsepower was the most powerful car sold in the US in 1985. This car does not feel like that. The 32 valve engine really doesn't come into song until about 3. It's a dual overhead cam design, 4 valves, so by its very nature it really doesn't come in until about 3,000 RPM, and you do feel a pull when you get to that level. However, even at the bottom, at down low, this engine has a very flat torque curve, and I can't brake off the line. I can't even get the tires to chirp. Not that they're going to burn out or anything. It just doesn't feel like a supercar should. I smell a little gas when the car's in the garage and idling. There's no black smoke or anything, and the idle, like I mentioned before, is just a little bit rough. So with all the fuel problems I had when I first started working on this car, I'm convinced the fuel injectors at a minimum need cleaning. Let me show you what I mean by the power. So off the line, here we go. Ready? Standing start. Floored. This is 5,000 RPM. Chris from the Porsche Club, Fred from the Porsche Club, recommended a company in Schenectady. They have a service that you can send out. They will electronically clean your fuel injectors. They will send you before and after flow rates, and then any recommendations if one needs to be replaced. They put all new O-rings in and a micro screen, and they do everything. So what I have to do is pull the injectors, put them in bags, clean them up as best I can with WD-40, get rid of the gas smell, seal them in Ziploc bags, and so that they won't be turned back in the post office. And then they promise a 24 to 48 hour turnaround. So later this week, I'm going to put the car on my rack, take the things off, and I'll work on a couple of these other things while I'm waiting for those to come back. So one of the things wrong, you can hear it right now. I'm at 1,200 RPM. The throttle's sticking. I have a new cable for it, but I have to constantly tap it down to get it back to idle. The throttle is slightly frayed at the connection, and I need to take care of that. So upcoming video will show me redoing the throttle cable. I ordered one about 2 years ago and never got around to putting it in, but now I'm getting to the point, it's just annoying to drive the car with a stuck throttle. So here's a good example. It's sticking right now. I'm slowing down, and it's just idling high. It's at 1,100 RPM. I tap it, and it drops right down to where it should be. While the fuel injectors are out, I plan to replace the throttle cable that's sticking. So in addition to the fuel injector and the transmission and the sticking throttle, on the way back, I noticed the clock had gone out, and then when I put the replacement fuse in, it was buzzing. Here's what it sounds like. This isn't the first time that's happened to me, and if you've been following along, about a year ago when I put the console back in, the clock gave me problems because of the wiring had been eaten by mice. Now I replaced all that, and to my surprise, the clock works like a charm. It doesn't get any of that LED bleed that you see in some of them when they get old. So works like a charm. Not a big fan of 24-hour clocks, but you know, it's the German way. But anyway, very sluggish there. So sure enough, when I got home, I pulled the trim off the console, pulled the clock out, and my suspicions were correct. The wires from its first real shakedown cruise of any length, they had become loose from the clock. One had grounded. That's what caused the fuse to go out. So that was a relatively easy fix. It's a matter of just pulling the console trim, pulling the clock out, reattaching those wires, tightening them this time, and hopefully we're good to go for good. Those are my two highest priorities over the next couple of weeks. The other thing I'm going to order are wheel bearings. I don't know if you can hear it through this microphone, but the front wheel bearings are just buzzing, and you don't want to let that go too long term. Yeah, it gets louder when I put load on it in a turn. So it's a fairly straightforward job to replace the front wheel bearings on here. There's some tricks you can do that I hopefully won't need a press, through some creative baking of the hubs themselves and cooling. So that'll be a future thing. However, you know, the inner and outer bearings and seals cost about, I think, maybe $60 for the set. But I got to take the rotor and the caliper off. Okay, I haven't done a brake job on this car, so if I'm going to take them off, I may as well replace it with good, brand new parts. So that's my plan with that. So thank you for watching. Stay safe, and we'll see you next week. Take care. Thanks for watching this video. Please press the like and subscribe button, comment below, and be sure to check out our other videos on this subject, as well as all of the great content on our YouTube channel. If you have any questions, you can call me at the number listed below, or be sure to check out our main website, guyswithrides.com.